It is time for questions to the Minister of Finance. Just want to let you know that question 11 has been withdrawn, and I call William Irwin to ask the first question.
Question number 1, Mr. Speaker. Madam Speaker.
During my discussions with the DAERA Minister prior to the setting of the budget, the Minister indicated that he had written to the DEFRA Minister seeking a meeting around the need for short-term financial support for farmers and growers in light of the ongoing wet weather conditions. I am not aware yet of the DEFRA Minister's response to this request.
Call William Irwin.
Can I thank the Minister for her response? Does the Minister accept that farmers and growers suffered horrendously due to the flooding? Many lost very heavily. They see business has been compensated, but no help for them. You understand their frustration?
Minister.
Yes, I thank the member for that. And yes, of course, I understand the concerns from farmers and from growers, and obviously there has been persistent wet weather over the last number of weeks. So obviously this is a matter first and foremost for the DAERA Minister, and he has highlighted during his discussions with me that he has raised this with the DEFRA Minister, and I am happy to continue to engage with the DAERA Minister on these matters. Obviously now the budget for the incoming year has been set, and it will be for ministers to prioritise within their budgetary allocations, but I will support the DAERA Minister in any ongoing negotiations that he's having with ministers in Whitehall.
Call Sinead Annis.
Principal Deputy Speaker, and I have previously raised this issue with the Minister for Agriculture and Environment around a support scheme for the farming community recently impacted by the flooding. But as the Minister said, what individual ministers do with their funding envelope is for individual ministers. But Minister, I know you have previously supported other financial schemes for those impacted by flooding and other issues. Maybe you could give us a bit of a flavour of those previous schemes, please.
Minister.
So the member will be aware of the financial support that was allocated prior to the Assembly coming back. 15 million was made available at that point in time, and funding was allocated to the Department for Infrastructure totalling 10.5 million, to the Department for Economy totalling 2.3 million, and to the Department of Health for £250,000, while £1 million of rate relief was provided to business premises impacted by flooding events. Obviously, there will be opportunities in year for ministers to bid during monitoring rounds, and I would be obviously open to considering bids made by any minister in respect of that.
I call Owen Tennyson.
Deputy Speaker, and thank the Minister for her answer. Financial assistance after flooding is one side of the equation. Would the Minister outline any engagement that she's been able to have at this stage with the Minister for Infrastructure around flood prevention and alleviation schemes?
Minister.
And the member is quite right. Obviously, the flooding, we have to deal with the outworkings of it, but there are a number of departments that will have responsibilities in respect of dealing with flooding and obviously flood prevention in the first place. And I have had some conversations with both the Minister for Infrastructure but the Minister for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs as well. And I suppose one of the things that he would be keen to emphasise would be the need for the environmental improvement plan to be agreed by the executive, so that we have a direction of travel that we are all working on together, and that's something I hope will happen in the coming weeks.
I call Colin McGrath.
Deputy Speaker, could I ask the Minister to use every effort that she can to try and influence that we get a cross-executive response to this? Farming is a business, and they are business people that are suffering as a result of the flooding, and yet other businesses were helped and assisted, and it seems like farmers have been left to fall between the cracks. Would you undertake to work with other ministers to see if we can help them?
Minister.
And I can indeed undertake to work with other ministers. Clearly, I'm from a rural community myself, so I understand both the impact on our farming and rural communities, but also the benefit and the input that they have locally as well. So I will certainly continue to work with all ministers, and I have said I know that the DAERA Minister has corresponded with the DEFRA Minister in respect of a potential financial assistance scheme for farmers, and that's something I'm happy to support him with.
I call Stephen Dunn.
Madam Principal Deputy Speaker.
Minister.
With the Speaker's permission, I will answer questions 2 and 6 together. As members will be aware, I am keen to see this scheme taken forward as quickly as possible to give bereaved families the opportunity to have that formal recognition of their loss. Initial discussions have taken place between the Department of Health and the General Registrar Office officials as to how the baby loss scheme may be developed. A further meeting will take place towards the end of May. Both Department of Health and GRO officials will meet with the managers of the baby loss certificate scheme from the Department of Health and Social Care in England in mid-May. This ongoing engagement will provide important lessons for the development of a scheme here.
Stephen Dunn.
Deputy Speaker, and thank the Minister for her answer. Will the Minister agree that there is a real need for delivery of this scheme at pace in order to avoid any additional unnecessary pain for parents that have lost a baby, and particularly focus in on the timescale and actual rollout of when this will be in place? Thank you.
Minister.
Yeah, and I am on record as saying that I want to see this move forward as quickly as possible. Obviously, I do think it's important that parents here who suffer that horrendous loss also have that loss recognised. There are a number of steps that we need to work through to ensure the legislation, resource and delivery plan are agreed and in place. It's likely that consultation will be required to determine the best way of meeting the needs of those who require this service, and I am keen to see the scheme obviously taken forward as quickly as possible, but obviously we need to go through those steps to do that and give bereaved families the opportunity to have that loss recognised.
Call Liz Kimmins.
And I thank the Minister for her quick action in taking this forward. The motion was only passed less than a month ago when we brought it forward, so it's really good to get that update. Minister, can I ask then if you can confirm that the General Registrar Office will engage with women who have been impacted by that baby loss, as well as bereavement organisations, including SANS, throughout the development of the scheme? It's very important their voice are heard.
Minister.
Yeah, and I thank the member for her comments. And there are some fantastic organisations who provide invaluable support to help families through their loss. These organisations bring a wealth of experience and expertise that obviously we as policymakers would want to use to ensure this scheme meets the needs of bereaved parents. So officials are currently considering options as to how the scheme could work, and have identified many areas where the views of both the public and bereavement organisations will be very welcome.
I call Colin Gilder now.
I got prayer last can call you cashed ever 3 Ireland the whole question number 3.
Minister.
With the Speaker's permission, I will answer questions 3 and 4 together. I have pressed the Chief Secretary to the Treasury on the importance of putting a fiscal framework in place as quickly as possible, including funding us properly based on need. This is essential if the Executive is going to be able to deliver sustainable, quality public services here. My officials are engaging with their Treasury counterparts on the application of the needs-based adjustment factor included in the financial package, the necessity for the Executive to be funded at an agreed level of need going forward, and the development of a wider fiscal framework. These discussions are ongoing, and I will be meeting with the Chief Secretary later this afternoon to press for progress on these important matters.
Colin Gilder now.
I thank
the Minister for that answer.
Minister, how in your opinion, or can you outline how we can get to a fiscal framework that provides a fair level of needs-based funding to allow us to provide services into the future?
Well, it's critical that a new fiscal framework provides clarity on our long-term funding model. As the member will be aware, the financial package is for 2 years, and concerns obviously have been outlined in respect of that. We must ensure that we are funded to our level of need to enable the Executive to deliver the high-quality public services that people expect and deserve, and for us to have sustainable public finances. The current approach is unsustainable, and where recent reports from both the Fiscal Council and the NI Affairs Committee have reflected what I've been saying, that the North is not receiving the funding that it needs. They both raise concerns about the financial cliff edge that we are facing, and that our funding should be adjusted based on need from the start of the current spending review. The Fiscal Council has made the point that we are the only devolved administration that is being asked to deliver public services whilst being funded below its level of need. So in my view, these assessments reaffirm the position for the British Government to secure an urgent long-term solution to ensure public services are sustainably funded, and any new fiscal framework will be key in achieving that.
I call Patsy McGlone.
I thank the Minister for her answer.
You've had the overwhelming support of the Assembly to negotiate a fiscal framework which reflects our needs, and you've outlined those. But it has been 3 months and there doesn't seem to be any sign of change in the UK Government's position. Can I ask, if the UK Government doesn't change its position, what's the plan B, or is there a plan B?
Minister.
So I have been consistent in setting out that that the engagement is continuing. So far it has been constructive. My officials are engaging with Treasury officials. I've met with the Chief Secretary to the Treasury on a number of occasions and meeting her again later this afternoon. But we do need to see urgent action from the British Government to ensure that we are funded appropriately based on our level of need, but obviously that we don't face that financial cliff edge in 2 years' time. That's something that I have stressed with the Chief Secretary to the Treasury on my previous engagements with her, and I will be continuing to do that, because despite that short-term uplift for our public finances due to the financial package, the current proposal, the current situation would see us effectively trapped below our level of need for a number of years, which effectively creates a fiscal ceiling rather than a fiscal floor, which is what all parties have been united in asking for. So we're not asking for a special treatment here. We're asking to be treated the same as Scotland and Wales, and for our funding to be needs-based, where in Scotland and Wales they are funded above need, and that would be denied to people here. So to me that's not a tenable situation. There are also a number of other areas that we think any new fiscal framework should also cover, and that would help us sustainably manage our public finances. These could include a new fiscal reserve, increased borrowing powers and increased devolved fiscal powers. So those are part of the ongoing engagement that we are having.
I call Jim Allister.
Is the Minister still committed to raising $113 million of resources? And in respect of the Secretary of State's gazumping of some of the functions and powers of the Department in respect of the iniquitous Irish Sea border, is there a knock-on financial consequence, or are all those costs still going to come out of the block grant? And how do her accounting officers deal with that situation?
Minister, there are several questions. I'll answer whichever you feel fit.
Thank you. And obviously as part of the financial package, the British Government indicated that there should be revenue raising of £113 million, which is tied to the write-off of the £559 million of overspend from last year. That's something that the Executive does not accept should be a condition, given that overspend accrued because we were being funded below our level of need. Obviously, I am not, as a Finance Minister, I do not want to be in the position next year of losing £559 million from our block grant. And in making the case to the Chief Secretary to the Treasury that we had limited levers to be able to raise revenue, that period has been extended to 24 months. In respect of the issues relating to the funding for the Windsor framework, the departments make bids to yourselves and then to Treasury. So Treasury pays for the arrangement, and up until now has been that Treasury funds the elements of the Windsor framework, and that we are anticipating will continue, and that we will see that in June monitoring round.
Call Steve Aiken.
Thank you very much indeed, Principal Deputy Speaker. The question on the fiscal floor and the actual level of it, has any modelling been done at the figure of 124, or is there a new figure that you think would be suitable for us to take forward, and have we come to that conclusion yet?
Minister.
And I know that the member will be aware of some of the work of the Fiscal Council in respect of the fiscal floor, and he will also be aware that the Executive doesn't just accept that 124 is the level of need, and that some additional modelling has been done by the Fiscal Council that take into account other factors such as policing and justice that could potentially see that factor of need being higher, and that's something that we want to build upon, and our engagement with Treasury around the actual level of need, as well as ensuring that that level of need is baselined in to our budgets, so that we are in a position that we are able to deliver high quality public services and have more sustainable public finances.
I call John Blair.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Question number 5.
Minister.
The protection of Lough Neagh and the surrounding environment is a key priority for the Executive. The Executive agreed to allocate the Department of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs £1.6 million of capital DEL in June monitoring to support actions relating to Lough Neagh. Moving forward, now that the budget has been set by the Executive, it will be for Ministers to consider the departmental priorities and allocate funding accordingly within their budgets. Departments can highlight any further funding requirements in relation to Lough Neagh as part of the in-year monitoring process, and any bids that would be made would be considered in the context of the funding available, competing budgetary demands, as well as the Executive's wider priorities, and it would then be for the Executive to allocate the funding available at that stage. And as the member will be aware, it was a very challenging budget that we were faced with for this financial year. I would have liked to have been able to do more across a number of departments, and clearly addressing the issues of Lough Neagh is a priority for the Executive and will be considered as part of the monitoring rounds in that respect.
Call John Blair for supplementary.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I thank the Minister for that reply, and given that, if we face it, the sums of money allocated outlined are likely to fall woefully short in relation to the scale of the problems at Lough Neagh, can I ask the Minister if, referring back to comments earlier about cross-executive responsibilities, that as the catchment area of Lough Neagh extends to and includes parts of the Republic of Ireland, if she's willing to work with the Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs Minister in order to try to secure shared island funding to help deal with issues there?
Minister.
Yes, and the member will be aware that at the recent North-South Ministerial Council plenary, the First and Deputy First Minister and the Taoiseach and Taoiseach had a conversation about Lough Neagh prior to the official meeting. So it's something that is clearly a shared priority across the island, and addressing these issues are cross-jurisdictional. They do, the issues of impacting our environment and climate and biodiversity don't recognise borders. So it is important that we have a joined-up collaborative approach, and I'll certainly be happy to work with the Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs Minister in any engagements he's having in respect of shared island funding or any other funding that may be available to him.
Matthew O'Toole.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Minister, when we all voted for a Lough Neagh rescue plan motion, including your party some weeks ago, the most modest estimate of the cost would be well north of £100 million in terms of investment. It is disappointing to see parties repeatedly vote for motions.
Is there
a
question there, Matthew?
Aligning, yes, there is. When it comes to actually, did the Infrastructure Minister make any bid to you for investment in wastewater specifically related to Lough Neagh recovery?
Minister.
I don't have the bids from the Infrastructure Minister in front of me, although I do know that significant funding is invested in NI Water in respect of our water infrastructure, which it would obviously impact on Lough Neagh and much wider, and I think in the region of £330 or £350 million a year. So that is something that I am aware of, and I'd be happy to write to the Minister or to the member in respect of any additional bids.
I call Nicola Broken.
Can the Minister outline the next steps in tackling the algae blooms in Lough Neagh so this vital economic asset is protected?
Minister.
So, I understand a set of evidence-based recommendation, a draft set of evidence-based recommendations to tackle the toxic algae in Lough Neagh and secure the longer-term improvement in water quality is being refined and finalised by the Department of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs, and that the recommendations for Lough Neagh will be brought to the Executive for consideration and discussion in due course. And I'm aware also that the DERA Minister has brought the draft Environmental Improvement Plan to the Executive for consideration, and it sets out actions relevant to supporting water quality across the north to secure longer-term improvements. So clearly there is a need for that collective action across government and private and public sector and community to tackle the issue of water quality. Clearly additional investment will be required, and this will need to be considered in line with the Executive's priorities and competing budgetary pressures.
I call Jerry Carroll.
Minister, 1.6 million is a paltry sum given the scale of the crisis. Can you confirm whether the Dairy Minister submitted a plan to you or the Executive to save the loch, including acquisition of the loch, establishing an EPA beyond the 1.6 million figure that you mentioned?
Minister.
So, as I have just said to the previous member, I understand a draft set of recommendations to tackle the issues relating to Lough Neagh will be brought forward to the Executive for consideration in the near future.
So, question 6 has been answered. I call Philip McGuigan.
Cash Dever Shack, question 7.
Minister. I am committed to doing all that I can to contribute to meeting the emissions targets in the Climate Change Act. My department plays a central enabling role in providing the frameworks and guidance departments need to consider climate change in their decision-making and procurement processes. In addition, my department also has a number of specific responsibilities, including taking forward a programme of uplifts for building regulations, managing the Civil Service Office estate to reduce its carbon footprint, and implementing a hybrid working policy to support new ways of working that also deliver environmental benefits.
Philip McGuigan.
And thank the Minister for her answer. In terms of some of the things she's detailed and other things, can I ask how tackling climate change will be reflected in the budget?
Minister.
So, as the member will be aware, the 2024-25 budget was agreed by the Executive on the 25th of April. Since devolution was restored, we have been really clear that this was going to be a very difficult budget, and the stark reality is that the demands on our finances far outstrip the funding that we have available, and no department therefore has received the level of funding that it bid for. Under Section 52 of the Climate Change Act 2022, all departments are required to exercise their functions in a manner that is consistent with achieving emissions targets and carbon budgets as far as possible. While some departments submitted bids for climate change, given the constrained financial position, I did not ring-fence any allocations specifically for this purpose, and this was to provide departments with the maximum flexibility to manage their own budgets. As climate action is so far-reaching, it should be a consideration right across spending in departments, and I encourage my Executive colleagues to consider their statutory obligations in the Climate Change Act when prioritising expenditure within the funding envelopes provided to their departments.
Sorry, can I call Nick Matheson?
Principal Deputy Speaker, has the Minister considered formally incorporating the concept of green budgeting into the budget process, drawing on the experience of other jurisdictions such as France?
Minister.
So, as I said, there are a number of statutory obligations that departments have already in respect of their budgets. And I have had a number of propositions put to me about specific types of budgeting. I am establishing a new budget sustainability team within the department, and they will be looking at a number of things, so that's something that can be considered alongside that.
I call Justin McNulty.
And thank the Minister for her answers thus far. In terms of the Civil Service Office estate, how many buildings are lying derelict and empty, and how do they impact your responsibilities in relation to meeting climate change targets?
Minister.
I would not have the details of what the member has specifically asked in respect of buildings that would be vacant. Obviously, my department is progressing a programme of work to reduce its footprint in scope of Department of a Finance Office estate by around 40%, and this does give us the opportunity to reduce costs, energy uses and support the journey to net zero. I'd be happy to write to the member with further details about what he has asked.
Call Declan McAleer. Minister.
There has been significant progress across the 4 city and growth deals Positive milestones have been achieved this year already, with more to come. The Belfast Region City deal is in delivery phase. Legally binding contracts for funding have been signed for 9 projects, with a further 6 due in coming months. Planning permission has already been granted for some projects, and construction has started on the Advanced Manufacturing Innovation Centre in Newtonabbey. The Derry City and Strabane District Council City deal is preparing for deal signing in summer 2024. The Causeway Coast and Glens growth deal signed heads of terms last week, and it will now begin work on outline business cases to progress towards deal signing, and the Mid-South West growth deal is working towards heads of terms signing in autumn 2024.
Thank
the Minister for her response. Can the Minister outline some of the specific benefits from the city and growth deals, and how many jobs you anticipate may be created?
So the £1.3 billion investment in the 4 city and growth deals will support significant shifts in many of our indicators, such as improving regional balance, creating employment opportunities and increasing productivity. Across the 4 deals, there are around 50 projects. At full business case stage, each project will specify the benefits to be realised from that project. So identified benefits will include job creation where appropriate. Once all projects in a deal have reached full business case, each deal will be able to clearly identify the benefits of its overall investment at deal level, and once each of the 4 deals has completed this stage, we will be in a better position to understand the extent of the combined benefits of the overall investment.
Thank
you, Principal Deputy Speaker. Question 9, please.
Minister.
I believe the method used for collecting rates is effective, given Land and Property Services collected a record of £1.5 billion of rates revenue in 2023-24 to provide funding for vital public services. The method used for collecting rates is the same for all ratepayers, regardless of whether they are domestic or non-domestic, and regardless of location.
Deborah Erskine.
I thank the Minister for answers so far today. The Minister will be acutely aware that our hospitality industry, and indeed our small businesses on the high street, are suffering, and one of the issues is high rates. Has the Minister looked at any ways in which we can combat that for those who are in the most dire of circumstances? Thank you.
Minister.
So the Executive provides extensive relief within the rating system. Over 75% of all business ratepayers are awarded some form of support in the region of £247 million per year. This includes the recently extended Small Business Rate Relief Scheme, which will provide in the region of £21.5 million of assistance to almost 30,000 small businesses, receiving a reduction of between 20% and 50% on their rate bill for this year. My department has also made and laid legislation to reintroduce the back and business support, which will help businesses in this category, and I believe that's in the Assembly next week. And if agreed, will provide businesses with a 50% rate discount for up to 2 years if they move into premises previously used for retail purposes that have been unoccupied for 12 months or more. The member will also be aware that I am currently considering the responses to the consultation on rates for revenue raising, and that's something that I will be looking at over coming weeks and months.
Cathy Mason for a quick supplementary.
Good, Ken Corlea. Can I ask the Minister, she's already outlined some of them there, but to provide an overview of the main supports that are currently available to assist businesses here?
Minister.
So I don't have the full list of rates reliefs in front of me. Some of the most relevant ones I have just outlined to the previous member, that for our retail and hospitality small businesses on the high street, and that includes mostly the small business rates relief, which, as I said, is awarded to 30,000 small businesses each year. And if agreed, then next week we will have the back and business support back in place, and we will also be bringing to the Assembly next week the rural ATM rates relief, which I hope members will support as well.
Mark Durkin, 1 minute left.
For the answer.
for that answer so far.
Able to tell us how many rate-paying businesses have had to close their doors permanently since the restoration of devolution?
Very quickly, Minister.
So that's not information that I have in front of me, and I'll be happy to write to the member if we are able to provide that information. I'm not sure that it's something that we would have, but I'm happy to clarify that with him.
We'll now move on to 15 minutes of topical questions, and I call Matthew O'Toole.
Madam Principal Deputy Speaker, Minister, in March your department issued a progress report on recommendations from the RHI inquiry. Your department rated yourself green on the implementation of recommendation 28 of the RHI inquiry, which is around improving the culture and practice of record keeping. The COVID inquiry has found in the last couple of weeks routine wiping of phones by senior officials and ministers, and it took 7 attempts to get the minutes of a critical executive meeting. Do you think your department should revisit the green rating that it awarded itself in March?
Minister. Minister, I just want to caution any questions under the Inquiries Act, okay, which are due to legal proceedings, which to the Assembly could be sub judice. So I just caution members and ministers about saying anything which would be in contempt of the inquiry or court. So, Minister, with that in mind.
And the COVID inquiry is ongoing and currently taking evidence, and clearly, while the important work of that inquiry continues, I don't want to get into a running commentary about specific evidence. That was obviously a very challenging time for everyone in society, but particularly traumatic to those people who lost loved ones, and I fully support the work of the inquiry and hope that it will help those people come to terms with the devastating impact that it had on their lives. Budgets and resources have been reprioritised within my department to meet our statutory responsibilities to the inquiry, and I do believe it is important that we learn lessons from the events examined to make sure we are better prepared for and can respond to a similar global health emergency should it ever arise in the future.
Matthew, for supplementary.
Thank you. Minister, with respect, this isn't simply about the COVID inquiry. Indeed, it's about culture and practice within the civil service, which your department has responsibility for, and we spent many millions of pounds reviewing in the Cochrane inquiry. Can I ask, quite apart from the COVID inquiry, that your department revisits and re-examines how its culture and practice of record keeping, given it marked its own homework in March and said that it was doing just fine on record keeping. It appears from the last couple of weeks that we certainly aren't.
Minister.
So my department developed new guidance for the civil service in June 2022 for official information held in non-corporate communication channels. This guidance sets out when non-corporate devices or communications channels may be used for official business and how any official information should be handled, which includes WhatsApps. It will be translated into policy and disseminated across departments by the 31st of May 2024. As I've already mentioned, it's the responsibility of each individual to ensure all relevant information is retained on Content Manager, an official repository for civil service documents and record management, and this is clearly set out in the overarching civil service record management policy and NI executive codes of conduct.
Malaysia McHugh for.
Carla. Minister, could you detail how your department is supporting the manufacturing sector in the current difficult economic crisis?
Minister.
So the Executive is providing £71.5 million of support in 2024-25 through industrial derating for over 4,400 local manufacturing properties, a measure which isn't provided in England, Scotland or Wales. These are no means all large companies. In fact, over 2,500 recipients of industrial derating fall under the 15,000 NAV threshold utilised for small business rate relief.
Malaysia for supplementary.
What engagement have you had with the sector since taking up your post?
I have undertaken detailed engagement with the manufacturing sector since taking up a post meeting with sectoral representatives at roundtable meetings on business rates generally and meetings focusing on the sector. Over the last 2 weeks, I have visited manufacturers in the factory environment to get a sense of the challenges and opportunities in that sector, and I also met with the wider manufacturing and logistics sector last week to look at the issues of strategic importance to the sector and what they require from the executive to support a sector that accounts for over 89,000 jobs, with many in Indigenous businesses.
I call Peter McReynolds.
Principal Deputy Speaker, could the Minister outline what engagements she has had with the Minister of Health in respect of junior doctor pay, with strike action looking set to continue?
Minister.
I have engaged with the Health Minister, as I have with all ministers, in the budget process, and obviously pay was an issue that the Health Minister raised in respect of that and the challenges that would be faced in year, and obviously the ongoing challenges in respect of junior doctors who clearly need to have their demands looked at favourably, given the importance of them to our health service and the important role that they play, often under very challenging conditions.
Peter McReynolds for supplementary.
I thank the Minister for her response. Will the Minister be raising the issue of junior doctor pay in discussions with Treasury, and does she believe that multi-year budgeting is an important tool in stabilising industrial relations?
Minister.
So I will be raising the huge challenges facing our budget with the Treasury when I meet them. I have impressed upon both Treasury and the Shadow Secretary of State the need for the Executive to be in a position to set a multi-year budget. Obviously that is dependent on the spending review period that the government in Westminster chooses, and we are not, for example, in the position that we are able to set a multi-year budget this year because this is the final year of a spending review. I would very much like to see that from the next financial year we would be in a multi-year spending review, but that's not something that's within our gift. But I will continue to make those representations because it does give departments a much better ability to be able to plan strategically to meet the challenges.
I call Cathy Mason.
Can I ask the Minister to outline how the 24-25 budget will support the need to improve the provision of quality, affordable and accessible childcare?
Minister.
Well, I suppose it's important to say that we need to get childcare right. It plays a vital role in our economy, and we need to support both childcare providers but also workers and families. Affordable childcare is particularly important in facilitating women's access to the labour market, and I'm keen to see work on the new childcare strategy progress as quickly as possible. Childcare is a priority for the Executive. As you know, ministers are committed to prioritising it, and it was important that this was reflected in the budget. The Executive has agreed to earmark £25 million to support a childcare strategy. That's to fund new and additional actions above and beyond those undertaken by departments within their remits on childcare, and should not be seen as the limit of our ambitions in respect of childcare, and hopefully we'll be in a position to be able to allocate or to be able to add to that funding in year.
Cathy Mason for supplementary.
I thank the Minister for that answer. Can I ask the Minister, how does the civil service, as a large employer here, support working parents?
Well, I suppose just to say that the civil service is committed to being a diverse and inclusive employer. I think it's important that we, as the civil service, are an example, and we have a range of supportive family-friendly policies in place, including alternative working, which allows for alternative or flexible working patterns within the civil service, which includes flexible working time, reduced hours such as part-time and job sharing, and compressed or personalised hours, also hybrid working. This offers a mix of working from home or remotely and from the workplace, which aims to promote flexibility and choice at work, and which meets the needs of both the civil service and employees, and also special leave, which provides up to 2 weeks paid leave for bereavement, including bereavement due to miscarriage. There is also provision for paid and unpaid time off for a range of issues affecting families, such as time off for dependents, and to facilitate practical arrangements as a consequence of domestic or sexual abuse. There's obviously maternity leave, adoption leave, maternity leave, shared parental leave, and ordinary parental leave that would be expected as statutory leave. And the civil service continues to run the former HMRC childcare vouchers, which is a legacy scheme only eligible for those who are already in the scheme. And other than that, the member will be aware that HMRC now runs tax-free childcare scheme, where staff can get up to £500 every 3 months. So if a member of staff receives tax-free childcare, they can set up an online account for their child, and for every £8 they pay into this account, the government will pay in £2 to the childcare provider.
Call Tom Elliott.
Thank you, Principal Deputy Speaker. I'd just like to ask the Minister, in the recent budget allocations, how much was bid for and how much was allocated for the combined departments in relation to climate change in the period of the budget?
Minister.
I am not sure that I have that information in front of me in respect of the bids that were made for the budget, but I would be happy to write to the member on that particular point.
Tom Elliott for supplementary.
Maybe the Minister then could indicate how much was bid from her own department in finance to see through the climate change for the period of the budget.
So again, I don't have that information in front of me, and I don't know the figure off the top of my head, but I will be happy to share it with the member.
Call Anya Murphy.
Minister, can you outline the impact of social value within the public procurement process?
Yes. Well, social value in public contracts can make a real difference, and particularly to the lives of some of the most disadvantaged people in society. Embedding social value in public procurement provides a significant opportunity to meaningfully contribute to economic, environmental and social outcomes. And to date, some of the positive outcomes since the introduction of the procurement notice include 3,500 people who were long-term unemployed or disadvantaged in the labour market have gained employment. 75 plus social enterprises are now part of government supply chains. 2,700 hours of volunteering with the voluntary community and social enterprise sector. 6,500 hours of skills development activities, 2,800 weeks of work experience, over 3,500 hours of environmental awareness initiatives, and 2,400 hours plus of health and wellbeing initiatives.
Anya Murphy for supplementary.
And I'd like to thank the Minister for her answer. Minister, in your own opinion, how is social value making a difference to the lives of people here in the North?
People who often encounter barriers to employment, people with learning disabilities or people without educational qualifications who have faced barriers within their education journey, can benefit from the employment and training opportunities provided by social value in public contracts. The impact in those individuals' lives cannot be understated. The invaluable work experience they provide can help build confidence and set those people on new career paths. The policy in relation to social value supports the Executive's commitment to being a living wage employer by mandating that all workers involved in delivering public services through government contracts are paid at least the living wage, and this is a major step forward in ending pay poverty.
Call John Blair.
Deputy Speaker, can I ask the Minister how the remaining allocation of financial transactions capital will be used, given that under half of it is still yet to be allocated for 24-25?
So obviously departments will have an opportunity to bid in year for additional money, including financial transaction capital, and I would encourage departments to come forward with bids for financial transaction capital. It's an area that we sometimes face challenges in spending, and obviously want to see full utilisation of the money that's available to us.
John Blair for supplementary.
Thank you, Principal Deputy Speaker, and thank the Minister for the answer. Can I ask her if she has plans to improving the strategy for spending FTC, given underspends which have occurred in previous years?
it's certainly something that I would be keen to look at, but obviously departments, and you will be aware of some of the restrictions around the use of financial transaction capital, so we are dependent on departments coming forward with their ideas for what they would like to spend it on, and working with other organisations and being able to do that. But it's certainly something I would be happy to look at.
Emma Sheeran, 1 minute left. Go for it.
Minister, can you outline what your department is doing to add local businesses back into our towns and high streets?
Very quickly, Minister.
Well, given the positive impact of the Back in Business scheme, I am glad to advise that legislation to restore this scheme was made by my department at the end of March, has been cleared by the Finance Committee, and the Assembly will debate it, I believe, next week, and I hope the Chamber supports the reinstatement of that scheme. When the Back in Business scheme was last in place during 2022-23, 101 businesses benefited from the 50% rate reduction, and the majority of those were small independent retailers. It helped businesses get started, supported jobs, and got long-term vacant units back into use. So I believe reinstating this popular scheme is more important now than ever to help new businesses to emerge.
Time's up. Well done. Go ahead.
Much indeed.